A new report by Burbio says that the majority of schools in the U.S. fall into the CDC's red zone for reopening. This analysis by the digital platform that tracks school data found that 91% of students live in areas where there are more than 100 new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents over the last 7 days. So Bo Erickson is joining us now to talk a little bit more about what this means. He's been covering the Biden administration and the CDC's guidance for opening schools safely. So that doesn't sound very promising. If the majority of students live in red zones, what do these numbers mean for schools right now? If there are schools that are actually open, in these areas, do they then need to close?
Great question. A lot of parents that I'm talking to and a lot of people involved in schools throughout the country are asking that exact question. The answer to that question is no. If schools are already open during this COVID-19 pandemic, the CDC says they do not need to close down. On the other hand of this, the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, is saying she's not mandating schools open. So we're kind of left in this middle ground. And as that chart that you get to points out, is that it's really hard to track even what schools throughout the country are opened or closed because there's really no good way to track this. In our reporting that I'm doing with my colleague Sarah Cook a lot, is we found that many states don't even know how many schools are opened and closed on a given day in their state. So the federal government is trying to put together this data right now. The best indication that we have right now is from Burbio, and it says that 64% of K through 12 students are doing some form of in-person learning that is traditional, going to school 5 days a week, but also a hybrid model, which means that students are sometimes in classroom throughout the week.
So, Bo, break down what these zones mean and why is it that the CDC guidance determines the zones based on the transmission in the community and not the school itself?
So to answer that last question, it is based on community spread because it is believed broadly that anywhere from the World Health Organization over to the studies that the CDC is publishing, it shows that the spread within the school is related to the spread within the community. There is not much scientific data right now that shows spread within the schools going out to the community, so they wanted to start on that higher level. So there is those 4 zones that you mentioned, blue, yellow, orange, and red, and most students throughout the country live in red zones right now. So the CDC's recommendation for that is that younger students can be in person and older students are mostly virtual. That is only their recommendation. Once again, they can't tell schools to do this. This is what they're saying they think they should do.
So why did they make a distinction between the younger kids and the older kids, hybrid versus full virtual?
Great question. So the data is still, we don't have a ton of data on this point, but the CDC did look at rates of COVID last year from March 2020 to September 2020, rates in children. And they found that children 12 to 17 were twice as likely to contract COVID-19 than younger students 5 to 11. There is belief by scientists, and when you look at these studies, that older students, like late middle school to high school students, transmit the virus more like adults. They are easier and unfortunately better spreaders of COVID-19. But many people throughout the country still say that we have to start from a place of reopening, get students in the classroom, and use these mitigation strategies to try to keep in-person learning safe.
So the guidance mentions these mitigation strategies. What are some of those?
So the guidance, like the CDC has been saying since this pandemic began last year, it's based on 5 mitigation strategies, and that is always wearing face masks. This past week in this new guidance, the CDC reiterated that they want to see 6 feet of social distancing with inside classrooms. And we constantly hear that number thrown out since last March, 6 feet. That took some people off guard because they wanted to see a 3-foot recommendation, because some public health officials say that 3 feet will do it justice, the distancing, and that it's really hard to do 6 foot of social distancing inside the classroom. The model that the CDC put out shows that only 12 desks could be in a classroom if it's a 30 by 30 classroom. So you ask, where are the other students? That is a problem that the schools will have to figure out. Some other mitigation strategies is also encouraging really good hygiene within the schools, like hand washing, figuring out how to do a quarantine versus contact tracing model. Those are huge questions that remain. We don't have much guidance from that from the CDC. And then also they're really telling school districts that cleaning and trying to do better ventilation, anything from opening a window to opening a door to redoing the HVAC system, which is really, really expensive. They're saying schools should be thinking about this as well.
So you just touched on, one of the key phrases, the expense. If you've got to redo the whole sort of HVAC system, that's a lot. But then there are little expenses that build up. And when you're talking about little kids, they may come to school with a mask and lose it. It might break. The schools are going to have masks to give to them. This is going to cost a lot of money. So where does the funding to implement those mitigation strategies stand in the stimulus package talks? And what's in that part of the package? Is there enough money?
So yeah, as you mentioned before, I covered the Biden administration, and the large pitch from the Biden White House right now on school reopenings is that it's almost conditional based on passing their American recovery package. And in that package that is currently on Capitol Hill waiting to be passed, it's not passed yet, they have hundreds of billions of dollars that could go to schools. And there is a breakdown out there, but large parts is that there would be about 30-some billion dollars to go directly to the schools, and then about $100 more billion that would go to state and local governments to decide if they want to put it to X, Y, and Z in some of those mitigation strategies that I mentioned earlier. The really hard part about talking about school reopenings throughout the country is that it's not a national system. We have a local-based system in this country, so that means about 13,000 school reopening plans that could be happening in the country at a given time. And so the Biden administration is trying to put this under a broad umbrella of guidance to apply to each one of those school districts.
All right, Bo, thank you so much.
Thank you.